All right, here we go. We're live for episode 41. Welcome back, everybody, to the Conservation Conversation. It's good to see everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday so far, either enjoying some coffee, tea, or wine, depending on where you are in the world or what your rules are for your weekends. So I'm real excited today. We have an amazing guest. We have Tish O'Dell coming in to speak to us about the rights of nature, and which is actually a way to completely change and conceive of ways that we can enhance nature and give nature more of a fighting chance, especially in today's world where things are very difficult. And please go ahead and click on the comments and let us know that you're here. And today I want to encourage everybody to, hey, good morning, Coralie. Thanks for being on. It's nice to see you here. I want to encourage everybody to use this opportunity today to talk to Tish, ask Tish questions, learn more about this rights of nature movement. And I'm excited to talk about that today. Hey, Mitch, good to see you. I hope you're doing well down there. I know Florida's been having quite a few issues with all the weather down there. So, hey, Andrea Bunasera, it's nice to see you. Thanks for tuning in from Romania. So I love seeing this worldwide audience that we have. Hey, Michelle, thanks for joining today. Today is a very exciting episode, and it's one that's very personal to me, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, but one of the major issues that we're facing in our country and that's being faced worldwide is the use of chemicals and pollutants that are being allowed into our nature, which is not only poisoning us, but poisoning the environment around us and the animals around us. So this is a major, major concern, because unless we find a way to stop this as it goes, then we're going to end up having more and more pollution, environmentally based cancers. And that's where my personal interest comes in. As many of you know, I am fighting an environmental type of cancer that was caused by pollution and things in the water, but nobody knows exactly how to solve it. So perhaps we're going the wrong way. Perhaps we're trying to solve something that we shouldn't even be dealing with. And let's see who else we have. Hey, Elise, it's nice to see you. I hope you're doing well. I know Elise is an amazing conservationist and activist. It's always working hard for the environment. So it's nice to see you on here. Hey, Sherry, nice to see you on here. Elena, oh, this is great. We have our whole eco family here. S. Bradley, hey, good morning. That's my mom. Hey, Mom. Thanks for joining in today. So again, we got an amazing episode today. But what we're going to go ahead and do right now is start the show off as we usually like to do. And we're going to begin with our opening, and then we're going to go right into it today. So I'll be right back. And as we always say, remember, it's our world, and today we're going to talk about it. All right, well, we're back now. So again, it's a very exciting day today. Tish O'Dell, our guest, and we are going to be able to talk about what is the rights of nature, what sort of legal protections that we can offer nature that can help us with ourselves. Now, before we bring Tish on, and I don't want to spend too much time today without our guest, because I'm very excited to have her on with us. But what I'd like to do is just really quickly talk about the rising rates of cancer. Now, cancer has been rising worldwide steadily since the 1970s. They started to follow it, and a lot of problems have been that these companies are not being held accountable for what they're putting in the water, and a lot of the activists here know about this and are already fighting in their own local levels. And this is what we need to do, is to have a worldwide movement that's pushed by local battles. Now, one of the most important aspects, I think, is something that we always have to remember, is that, the ego, as we see here, is where we place ourselves atop of all the animals and consider ourselves stewards of these animals, stewards of the world. But in fact, we live in an ecosystem. We know that because we call it the ecosystem. So we are actually part of the system. And we have to remember that as we treat the world around us as we treat ourselves and as the world will treat us. So if we are poisoning the world is going to end up giving us more of these types of environmental cancers. And a lot of these cancers are hybrid cancers that they don't really know how to battle. And I think, we talk a lot on the show about upstream solutions and downstream solutions. The upstream solutions being, for example, in plastics, to stop the manufacturing of so much plastic, as opposed to a downstream solution of talking about doing a beach cleanup. Both are effective, but we need to rethink things in upstream solutions. And that's what our guest today is going to help us talk about. A lot of times it's the foundation that we come from, that we build our belief system on, that is the problem. And I'm very excited for today's guest. So real fast, I just wanted to bring on our quote for the day, and then we're going to go right to Tish. So today's quote is one of my favorites. This is, let's see. This is when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. So we have to remember that the environment, again, it's a relationship. How we treat the world is how the world treats us. And we need to find a way to be more in unity with our surroundings. So who would say it better than myself, but Tish O'Dell. Tish, thank you. And thank you for being on the show today, and welcome.
Thanks, Eric. Oh my God, I love that intro. That's so perfect. I love the way you're tying everything together.
Well, it is. I mean, for me, it's a very personal issue. Having a cancer that I've been fighting for 15 years, they don't know how to deal with it, and they don't understand where it comes from. And they're not necessarily giving enough weight to environmental pollution. And so that's why I think it's really important today. And I really appreciate you being on with us, because sometimes we're chasing the wrong solutions to a bigger problem. And and that's what I love about this rights of nature movement. Now, a lot of our, again, everybody, I would like to say, use this time to interact with Tish, ask questions, because this is an amazing opportunity that we have right now to really get a new perspective on how we can change things. Hey, Camilla, good morning. Yes, I love the ego over eco graphic as well. And actually, let's bring everybody on here so that we can get there. Camilla says, we can't heal the environment that makes us sick. And that is true. As long as our water is being polluted, and as long as our nature is being polluted and the animals are being polluted, we're all going to be polluted. So you know what? Let's just start from the very beginning, Tish. How about if you can help us understand exactly what do we mean when we say the rights of nature?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. The term is obviously gaining popularity, and it has different definitions depending on who you ask. I can tell you what it is. It's a movement to recognize that nature has a right to naturally evolve, exist, flourish, regenerate, and to be healthy. It's also a movement that recognizes nature as a real party to any legal or administrative proceedings. And it's a movement for environmental justice. So, to me, that's what it is. And to our organization, which is the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. And I can tell you what it's not. I mean, it's not about protecting nature simply for the benefit of humans. Also not about giving nature personhood rights. That's something that's confused a lot.
Yeah, I've kind of heard it compared, when they talk about Citizens United, where where companies now have personhood rights that in a lot of ways allows them to pollute more. And, that kind of brings me to my next question, which is, we have pollutions, and we've always had this battle between pollutions and regulatory agencies. And we talk a lot about Andrew Wheeler and how the regulatory agencies right now have really stepped back. But I would like to talk to you a little bit more. If you can help us maybe understand regulatory agencies in a bigger perspective, because what we're talking about today is actually changing our entire way of thinking about how we're allowing companies to run. So how do you guys see the regulatory agencies that we have right now?
Right. And that's like a big problem that people, whether it's water or air or the food we eat, entire environmental, we call the regulatory system the regulatory fallacy.
Hmm.
And at CELDF, we teach school. It's an over 8-hour school. We're doing it right now, obviously, via Zoom in 4 modules. But a lot of this is because people don't understand one of the things we teach is this regulatory model that we operate under, and people don't understand it. And our modules are kind of set up, so we have to understand where we are first and what really the root of the problem is before we can start, to change it and create something better. But people don't understand that the first regulatory agency was actually created by the government and industry working together. And it was the railroad industry. And it was back in 1887. It was the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Commission. And it was created because of industry wanted it. The railroad was going across the country at that time. Obviously, they were going through towns, right, and villages and all those kinds of things, people's where they lived, their communities, and they were destroying things as they went along. Big surprise. So the communities were coming up with things, like holding the corporation, the railroads accountable, and they were imposing fines. They were levying taxes on them and, contacting the railroad and bothering them. And they didn't like this. So with government officials, they came up with this great idea. We'll create this agency and we'll allow people to go there. So that'll be, and they can vent their concerns. But actually, this is a quote. I pulled it out from our curriculum. And this was the ICC, Charles Adams. He was later president of the Union Pacific Railroad. He said, well, what's needed to solve the railroad corporation's problem? So this is their problem, right? What's desired is something having a good sound, but quite harmless, which will impress the popular mind with the idea that a great deal is being done, when in reality, very little is intended to be done. So, if you understand that, and so it worked so well for the railroads, that they've created so many of these protection agencies, right? And the people believe all these agencies are here to protect us, but we have the, EPA, we have the FDA, we have for workers, the National Labor Relations Board, the FCC, the USDA, the SEC. I mean, it's an illusion that the government's looking out for and protecting the people and the environment. When in reality, it holds hearings, right, and lets people vent so they feel like they've done their part. They issue permits that actually legalize the harm. And then they let the industry write the regulations, which that's another thing a lot of people don't understand. They think that there's these unbiased, government appointed officials that they're writing the regulations. It's actually the industry themselves, and it's a huge sham. And anyone who's tried to work through the system, like you probably have, realizes this, and it can identify with some of this.
That's really amazing because a lot of times, and I think it's worked, a lot of times we always end up talking about, well, if the EPA can do this, then we can stop them from doing this. And a lot of people are trying to go through the very system that has been designed to protect the companies. It reminds me of when I learned about Keep America Beautiful, the collection of the companies that wanted to start using plastic instead of glass bottling, and created the famous Crying Indian commercial, where it said to people, don't pollute, don't throw your trash out, and it suddenly was on us. It was about us being the the big scourge on the world instead of the actual companies. So it feels like they're trying to sort of control the entire paradigm of the conversation.
They do. And look at when, Trump supposedly was like, getting rid of or defunding like the Environmental Protection Agency and other, what does it get the activists doing? Fighting to keep that agency that's really like not doing anything. And so many people want to blame this, on Trump, which obviously, that's a whole different conversation and story, but we have to be realistic. I mean, he was elected 2016. We were of ecological collapse before he got elected. So, we've had this, the EPA has been in place since 1972, I believe it was Nick put it in place, which that should tell you something too.
I've always wondered, why did Nixon create the EPA? It always seemed to
Yeah,
me
now you know.
an interesting, weird.
Right,
You
because
know.
there was a lot of environmental activism going on at that time, right? So how do we squelch it? We'll create an agency, okay, that'll handle everything. And and they write exemptions to those regulations. They self-monitor. Who do you think enforces the regulations? Self-monitor. So that's, I mean, the whole thing's a sham. So now you know why we call it the regulatory fallacy.
I really like that, regulatory fallacy.
Mhm.
And it's true, because I mean, I admit, even in myself, think of it in those terms. And, a lot of times they like to simplify it where it's easier to have a good guy and a bad guy in a way. It's a mythology that people need and they hold on to, and I think, but, it recently people have been understanding that, for example, the EPA, USDA, a lot of these companies outlast presidencies, there's no real, one side or the other isn't really any form of an answer, nor are they any form of the problem. The problem exists deeper. It exists with big business being allowed to go as usual without any form of having to pay for what they're doing or being held accountable in any way. Now, what I wanted to ask is, so now, kind of knowing that the system that we all hoped would save us isn't really there to help us, this brings us back to the rights of nature. I just wanted to say hi to Jason Staples. I'm glad to have you here in Facebook jail. Jason, Jason is an amazing conservationist, but I'm not surprised you're in Facebook jail. A lot of us end up there when we start talking about the environment. And Mitch is another one down in Florida, living it right now while giving testimony to the FDEP. FDEP, another regulatory agency that is an absolute joke. I've seen them let everything go around. And Camilla says tobacco science. Interesting.
Right.
So here we are. Exactly. That makes perfect sense. We know that tobacco is really bad for us, but we're all still allowed to buy it. And they believe that it's being regulated somehow. So, once we get past this, when you kind of pull the veil off and say, okay, now we know that they're not here fighting for us. Then it comes down to, Tish, what can we do? What does your organization do? And how does it fight back in a way that helps the environment, since these agencies are kind of not where our answer is going to be?
Right. I mean, we all have only so much, energy to do activism in, right? And so it's like, where do you want to spend that energy? And so, one of the things we talk about, because you'll hear a lot of activists saying, the system's broken, we need to fix it. Well, we don't say that with our organization. We realize the system's fixed and we actually need to break it. We're the ones who need to take a sledgehammer to it, smash it to smithereens, and create a completely new system that actually does work to protect people and nature. And so, that's kind of where the rights of nature comes in, because it doesn't fit within this system. We describe it almost as a box that we're kept in. So they write the rules and we follow them. This is about us writing the rules and changing the rules of the game. And rights of nature, I want to make sure I say that this isn't anything new. I mean, this isn't something that, some white people came up with and discovered, oh, this is a great idea. I mean, this is indigenous people have understood the rights of nature for a very, 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 since the beginning. I mean, thousands of years. So, we can't take any credit that this is anything that, we've come up with. It's just our system of law puts humans at the top. Get a hierarchical kind of thing. We're separated from nature in our whole culture, the white Western colonial settler culture, right? Yeah, exactly. That graph, the ego and the eco. Whereas rights of nature and indigenous culture has always seen that humans are a part of nature, not separated from it. And so, like what you were talking about, Eric, and it's so true, it's like, why would you need a law to say, don't poison the lake where you get your drinking water from?
Right?
Because you're actually poisoning yourself. If you're going to drink why would you need a law to tell you to not poison, because you're poisoning yourself? So, you know, that's just putting it on real basic, obvious terms, but, you know, it's this paradigm shift. And I heard someone the other day say something. They said, we have a economy over ecology, and we need to flip that, you know, ecology over economy. And you hear it in all the campaigns when we do try to institute a change like this. You know, it's all about jobs. It's all about the money it's going to cost, how corporations are going to leave, and the community is going to lose all this revenue. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. No, but like what you're saying with the cancer, I mean, if we're killing ourselves, we're killing all the life, we're killing all the ecosystems, just, you know, and so people get upset sometimes and go, well, you know, we need a job. Of course, people need to put a roof over their heads. They need to have food on the table. But isn't there a better way? There's got to be a better way, because this obviously isn't working. So,
you know, and that's it. I mean, I think we have, and you know, it's kind of weird because in human thinking, it's always, well, it's always been this way, or, you know, we don't have sort of a cultural understanding, at least in this country, past, you know, maybe 100 years when, you know, we started the Industrial Revolution and things started to really transform. So a lot of times people have a hard time conceiving of a different way to view, you know, things. But what we have seen is that over this last 100 years, we have destroyed the very nature that sustains us. And, you know, like I said, for me, you know, it's about stopping future generations and future children from not having a choice. You know, there's no choice in if you're going to get a pollution or an environmental cancer. You know, and you know, it's been amazing because there's a lot of great activists out there that it all comes from the roots level. You know, it comes from moms, grandmoms, dads, brothers, sisters, people that are tired of watching their loved ones get sick or their friends get sick. You know, it's very rare that you can meet somebody. When I was growing up, if your grandfather had cancer, it was kind of like, oh, wow, I'm sorry, but it was rare, as opposed to today, where I think almost every single family has somebody that's battling cancer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, did we freeze? Can you?
You know, familiar with.
I'm losing you. Let's see.
You guys.
I can't really hear you very well, Eric. Sorry.
I think. Let's see. Sometimes this does happen. It's going to be problematic sometimes. Let's see. Hopefully, we're going to be back on here in a second. Can anybody see us? Please type in your comments if you can see we're still live. Every now and then, the signal will get a little bit stuck. Sketchy audio lagging, says Camilla.
Okay.
Let's see. Mitch Allen says. Let's see. Mitch Allen says. Let's see. Are you seeing us online? Oh boy, it's always a problem. Here we are in the modern world, and we still can't do a basic podcast, even with super fast internet.
Maybe the corporate state doesn't like what we're saying.
You know, there you go. I have to say, every time I do get critical of things, suddenly I'm not allowed to be on Facebook. So
yeah, there you go. See,
let's see now.
But what you were saying, Eric, is so relevant. Like, you know, that people can't envision anything different because that's what we've been born into. And a lot of times I say that when I'm teaching, you know, our democracy school. So, you know, people who were born into when we had slavery, I mean, they couldn't imagine what it looked like to not have slavery, right? I mean, for them, that was a concept they couldn't conceive of. Or when women didn't have the right to vote and own property, you know, it was a patriarchal state. That's what we say. It was, you know, a patriarchal state before it was a slave state. You know, and here we live in a corporate state. So for us, we don't know any different. And so we can't imagine how it would look differently if corporations didn't have all this power. Because basically what they have right now, with the personhood rights that they've gained, is they have more rights than we do in our communities. So in other words, a corporation's poisoning the water, like since we keep talking about the water, and you try to stop it as a community, and they'll pull up and say, no, you're interfering with our civil rights. You can't stop us because we're being deprived, of our right to profit, to own property, and that's the whole basis of the system. That's why it's complex. I mean, it's really not, but it is in some ways when you get into the law, right, and the legal system. But we view nature as property to be owned. And so corporations, like even when the EPA issues a permit, that permit is property for them. So when you try to, it legalizes the harm, first of all. So if you go to court, they'll say, well, what they're doing is legal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the permitting is that is actually a very interesting, important thing. I learned that down in Florida because a lot of people go and they fight against permits because that's sort of the only way. Every time they get a permit, they go. But I found, for example, in Florida, there's a revolving door between the lawyers that work for the companies, and then they end up usually in the permitting offices. And there's a revolving door comfortability between the supposedly regulatory agencies and the actual law firms that take care of these companies. And that's why I think it's so important of what you guys are doing, because we over here also need a legal way to really go in and to try to fight that. Because, I always say that a problem that we make is that we think that companies care, and they don't care. It's not their job to care. It's their job to make profit for their shareholders. And we go and we protest and say, you're poisoning us. And they're like, what? It's not the same language. So I think it's really important that you guys are providing a language that the companies can understand, that the people can understand. And you guys are sort of creating a bridge between that's been missing for a long time. And it's allowed things to really spiral out of control.
What we've wind up doing, they write regulations. Let's say that you're allowed to put so many parts per million, of XYZ toxic chemical into the water. So you wind up going to the hearing and you're fighting for them to enforce that regulation. When you think about it, it's crazy. There's a difference between regulating the harm and prohibiting the harm. Two completely different things. And so that's part of, they get us. That's again, going back into that, they write the rules and then we follow them so obediently. What we don't realize is corporations are writing the laws, and not just about the environment, but they're writing the laws, handing them to our legislators, and our legislators pass them. So in other words, we, the people, are very obediently following laws written by corporations. And that's what has to stop. Right, what we're doing, our work is about the people again writing the laws, because to me, the people who are in the communities and are impacted by these laws, because laws are supposed to reflect our morals, values, what we want in our communities, and just laws, and it's based on rights. And so who's writing those though, and for whose benefit? And that's what our work is about, that it should be the people coming up with the laws, and corporations should follow the laws that the people write.
I love that. It just makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I've never thought of that before. The idea that we are actually out there trying to fight to allow them to still pollute. Like we're kind of falling into their end game just by thinking that we can make a change within a system. As is, and it just makes perfect sense that the community should be allowed, to control what's happening. I know, for example, Florida just had a big thing where they tried to pass a law to prevent communities from allowing to pass legal measures for their local areas.
Right. So that's called preemption. Yeah, that's called preemption, and that's one of the things in the box. And they do that over and over again too. And it's not just about environmental issues. So a law that strips the people in the local community of having any say in all kinds of issues that corporations don't want to be bothered with the people having a voice in. So whether it's environmental issues, whether it's gun issues, whether it's waste disposal. I mean, it doesn't matter what the issue is. It's whether it's raising minimum wage. I mean, the state or federal level pass a law saying no local community can pass any laws interfering with these issues or these corporate activities.
That feels like the exact opposite of how we all perceive the system that we are inside of. And it's a real PR job that they've done on us. And I like that you guys are sort of deconstructing that, because, in order for us to change, we always talk about, we're still living out of concepts and ideals from the 1500s, and we need to readjust our foundation and our way of perceiving the problem and the way of perceiving the solution.
Exactly.
And that is really, I love that you guys are doing that. I just wanted to catch up. Let's see. Jason says capitalism was the original sin of America. Interesting. Mitch says there is no acceptable level. And I think that's, Tish, what you're getting at. If I were to write a law saying how much radon I would allow into my drinking water, I would say none. Whereas the companies say, well, we're allowed to have, the EPA, for example, allows anywhere from 300 to 10,000 units in radon. And I found that was insane based on the state's approach to how they regulate the radon. Mitch Allen says BMPs are just suggestions and recommendations. And Jason says permits are just an extension of legal radial venue control to wildcat and or whatever. So that's what I was going to ask.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Oh, okay. So I was going to say, and again, everybody that's on the show, please feel free to ask Tish questions, because you have an invaluable resource right here, right now. But Tish, what I want to get into is kind of, now that we've talked about these ideas, let's say you're somebody that just sees this outfall, coming out of the factory. It's dumping into your river, and that your local water comes from that river. How do people move forward? How can we have an impact? What would your, how would your organization approach trying to make these types of changes for somebody that sees this happening in their town?
Right. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of times when we actually, in our own communities, because that's a lot of times people will say, well, you're working at the wrong level when you start locally, that you need to work at the state level but again, you have to think that's where the system wants us to go, because it's easier for corporations to control a few people at the top. When you think how many local communities there are, it's a lot harder to control all of us in our local communities, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is you have to remember, a lot of us get active and involved when there's something that happens in our local community. And some people have claimed and said, well, that's NIMBYism and all that. But in a way, it's really not. I mean, that's how I got involved. That's probably how you got involved. We all get involved when it directly impacts us. I mean, we read about things happening other places, but that's usually not enough to get us that active. So I'm not for NIMBYism, so that it at least gets us active and awake. It's what we do after that. Like myself and you, it seems like, once I learned that it wasn't just happening in my backyard, this is how it works everywhere. I can't stop working to change this, because it's not just about my backyard. And we have to also realize, so when a community sees something and it's at that point where it's probably going to happen, like the permit's been issued and all that, it may be too late. I mean, maybe not, but it may be too late at that moment to try and change laws and stuff and think that's going to fix it. But changing law isn't the only approach. I mean, and when we talk about rights of nature, it's not just about changing the law. I mean, that's obviously what we hope will happen at the end, but this is about a cultural shift that has to happen too. And so whenever we've had that in the past, movements that change, like, for example, rights of nature is about expanding rights. Okay. And so whenever that has happened, that's a power shift. And so in our case, we would be expanding rights to nature, and we may be taking some rights away from corporations, the polluters, right? So they're not going to be real happy. It's a power shift. And laws should follow, obviously, what the people want, but they're usually the last to follow. So culture, it's about getting the community engaged. putting pressure on the system, and there's different ways. Direct action, may be needed. I don't know if some of you saw that Ruth Bader Ginsburg movie that was out where, about we're getting women's rights and changing things in the 60s. And she said something in the courtroom that, the change has already happened in the streets. It's already happening out there. We just need you to now recognize the law, making it, legalizing it. So, that's what, it's not any one single action, but it's going to take a lot of education. Because again, we've talked about how people in our minds, we've been so propagandized and brainwashed by the corporate state. So you have to educate the community first, and we have to explain and frame the problem, right? Our messaging is important. Maybe getting people out in the streets, whatever it takes to put that pressure on the system. And the law is one way to do it. So when we write a lot of times these rights of nature laws, and I had the privilege of working with the people in Toledo on the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, it's about putting pressure and exposing and more people, becoming aware of the system. And then that helps. So the laws are actually used as an organizing tool, especially at the beginning of a movement for change like this.
I love that. And, right now it feels like it's a perfect time because we see, for example, Extinction Rebellion, we see protests around the world, we see people becoming really conscious, and sometimes they don't understand how to approach what's happening. It's more broad stroke. And I think that, it's interesting because if we have, reminds me of, Pete Seeger had this great quote. People said, well, how do you really think that music can make any change? And he said, well, if you think of it as a balance, and all the sand is on one side like that, then you just take one piece of sand at a time and you put it on the other side, and eventually it changes over. And we're seeing that, I think, in the mentality of people now, because, especially with the internet, we have a lot more access to have materials available and to understand what's happening is happening in our town, is happening around the world. It's a very, it's a systemic problem. I always call it the cancer of the body politic. It already, the problem is within the way things are. And I love that you say we have to rethink how we're going to approach it in order to really make a change to it.
Right.
Now, real fast, I just wanted to get to a few comments that I thought were interesting. Coralie says, fighting for millions of acres of federal preserve right now, fighting to local government and taxation without representation is frustrating. I know Coralie's been fighting for a lot of nature and to try to keep what is out there in her local area in Indiana. Mitch says local grows the movement. Absolutely. Again, it's that that sliding scale idea. Sonia Cook, hi, good morning. Can you please introduce Tish again? What is her organization? Of course. As a matter of fact, let's, Tish, put up the website. This is the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, and this is a way that everybody can get involved locally, which creates national change as well. And that actually brings me to my next question for you, Tish, here in a second. Sherry says, Tish, even though we feel Citizens United needs to be overturned as it stands, are we as a corporation able to use Citizens United for our benefit for protections?
I'm not sure what she's getting at. There are citizen protections. I mean, Citizens United is the case that we hear about a lot, obviously, because it's one of the more recent, besides Hobby Lobby, as far as corporate rights go and corporate personhood, and we call it privilege. But it goes way back. I mean, it goes back to the 1800s. That corporate rights, I always put rights in quotes, have been recognized by our courts and the system. So that's another thing we go over. But Citizens United was like icing on the cherry on the sundae kind of thing. So it's been going on for a long time. And again, the problem with us putting nature into that personhood status is it's not. Again, it's putting people at the top of the hierarchy, and that's not true. It's not the inclusive that we're part of nature. And obviously, then you get into all kinds, because we're trying to fit something that wouldn't fit. It's like trying to put a square peg into a round hole, because personhood also implies liability. And so, I mean, are you going to hold a river liable that floods? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. That's kind of like, so it doesn't work so well. And I don't think we want to pursue that way of thinking about nature, that it has personhood rights. I mean, that's just the wrong way to go.
That's great to hear, because even before talking to you, I was sort of seeing it, because again, the system has led us to believe that, okay, it's all about, being a person. And that's very interesting. It's like you said, that, that triangle where we place humans at the top, that's not the concept you guys are going for. You guys are going for the concept of the inclusion that we need to protect what we have. Now, I would like to ask you, let's see, Sonia says, I went out of Facebook and checked out her site. CELDF provides free and low-cost legal services, grassroots organizing, and education to communities, states, and countries facing injustice. That is beautiful. We help them assert their rights to fight the harms they face. And that is so important, because every community has a different battle, whether it's the air quality, the water quality, what's being dumped into the ground or buried in the grounds. As Sherry says, yeah, reversing the table on them.
I want to add to that, our work, it's also, we're not a savior. I want to throw that out there. A lot of times people think, because that's how we're taught again, these agencies, we're going to elect new faces. I'll call CELDF, that this is this savior. I mean, we're here to help, but the real saviors are us, the people in the communities. It's about the people. And that's what democracy is about, right? It's about us actually participating, and participating means more than just voting, for a president once every 4 years. It means really paying attention. The reason they've been allowed to get away with all this is because a lot of us haven't paid attention to what goes on in the government. A lot of people go, oh, that's politics. I don't want to pay attention to that. Oh, we'll just elect this person and they'll do it for us. Oh, this agency is there. It's protecting us. No. We have to actually be involved. We have to know what's going on. And it's not like we'll ever win this. That's the other problem. We'll win it and we'll be done and we can go home. Like people, in the 70s, the Clean Water Act got passed. Oh, good. We won. And then we go home. This is a battle that will never end. I mean, because when you think of it as a power shift, those who, once we gain some of that power, which I believe we will, we have to, it's happened in the past. Well, the other side doesn't just accept that. They're going to fight to get it back. And that's what they've done. And so, it's our mentality about that as well, that our activism, it's not about winning and then, oh, we won and you go back home and now I can live my life again. It's a continual. And I think we need to keep educating, the next generation that comes. And it's like, you need to take it over now. And then because there's also a responsibility and obligation with democracy that we owe something to that next generation that comes after us. And that's been missing. We're a lot about me here and now. It's got to change too.
That's a great point. Like they, a lot of, there was my friend that was Iroquois always said, that they would make decisions based on 7 generations ahead. And I've seen on your site, you guys also talk about, we're not, it's not our world, we're borrowing it from the future,
Exactly.
And, now I'm curious, we got so excited and I just jumped right into rights of nature, but I want to know also, if you can tell everybody, how did you get involved? Like, how did you end up here where your life is now devoted to trying to help everybody save nature and have a cleaner future?
Yeah. My life changed about 9 years ago. And it was in my local community. And I had always thought I was pretty active, and I knew what was going on in the world and I understood my government. And then we have in Ohio, I'm about 10 miles south of Cleveland in a suburb. And they started doing urban drilling for oil and gas in my community. And it kept expanding. And obviously, the more they expanded it, the more issues and accidents there were. And then we started looking into it and, learned all of this, that we can't stop it because the state had passed a preemption law on oil and gas drilling. And, I thought, well, I'll run for office. I ran for mayor and I thought, well, then I'll solve it. I'll stop the problem, right? But then I learned all about how the election process works. And then somehow someone at a campaign event asked if I'd heard of CELDF. And I said, no, I wrote it down and I went home, Googled them. And, that I'm still here and I'm fighting harder than ever because I believe in this, whole strategy, and that the system is the problem and that's what we need to fix. And I haven't found anything else, since that time. But we did pass, and it was the first in Ohio, a Bill of Rights prohibiting oil and gas drilling. Went to court many times. The courts ruled in favor of the drillers because the drillers knew that we were violating their rights. After a couple of years of, fighting in court and losing technically, but again, I'm just saying that technically, no more drilling happened because no new drilling because well, it's too litigious there, the drillers. They said, we don't want to go back there. But the other thing that happened that was much more important than that, they thought that would shut down any more efforts in Ohio, and it didn't. We had over 40 attempts and 7 laws passed in Ohio that all include rights of nature. Of course, the biggest one in Ohio has been the Lake Erie Bill of Rights as far as rights of nature. And so what is so important about this and why people should not pay attention to that traditional win-loss thing is because it plants seeds and it shows other people a different path. Something, oh, we could try that. That makes sense. We heard that so much after the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And it garnered global attention. And that's what people were saying. Like, well, of course this makes sense. Of course the lake should have rights. And that's the part, obviously, the corporate state wants to shut down. It's kind of like letting a genie out of the bottle, just the idea, right? And they want to push it back in. And so since then, they did pass preemption after the Lake Erie Bill of Rights passed, and they inserted it sneakily into a budget bill to try and prevent other communities in Ohio from passing anything that has rights of nature in it. And my advice is do it anyway. That's called civil disobedience. By you passing the law anyway, maybe it'll even mean if they've tried now to keep us off the ballot so we can't even vote. God forbid, in a democracy, we don't want people to propose their own laws and vote on them because then we might really know what the people want. So I tell people, maybe we're going to get to a point where the people have to hold their own election, and we'll have the state's illegitimate election, and then we'll have the people's legitimate election for an issue. We have to think creatively and realize that the corporate state is going to do everything to suppress this, to stop us. And it reminds me of the Gandhi quote, where he says, well, first they ignore you. So first they did. That's how Broadview Heights got passed. They ignored us. And then the second one is, then they laugh at you. Well, we heard that all the time here. It was, oh, what are you going to do? Put a squirrel on the witness stand with rights of nature? And they'd make fun of it. And then it's not so funny because we keep getting more and more communities to do it. So then they fight you. So now they're fighting us. They've passed laws to preempt us, to try and keep us off the ballot. But so that means to me, I feel good about that. That means we're approaching the fourth phase, which is we win.
Which is exactly, and that's such a great quote too, and it is exactly how we watch these things work in stages. I know Mitch is somebody that really does a lot of work. Oh, he says it as well. They did 10 years ago, and they shut down a mining approval. So to get in there and to say no more. And eventually, I imagine if the people start to take more control, they're bound to, even the politicians are bound to have to start to take it into account. And so it brings back, I was going to put up the website here just so everybody could see it. It brings back the idea of, we really need to make these changes and to show companies that we're not going to accept any of this anymore. And I love this, Observing Revolution. And this, by the way, if you guys have not been to this website, CELDF.org, and I'm going to put it back on the screen for you, but please go there and check it out, because this is not a group that's trying to change things and say, jump on board and, just follow us, like a Greenpeace or a PETA or any of those types of things. This is a group that wants to empower everybody in their local communities to make changes. And they do have a virtual democracy school. And a lot of us think, well, we already know what democracy is, but there's a lot of laws and a lot of things that we don't know about. And there's a lot of ways that we have more power than we know. And one thing we always talk about here on Conservation Conversation is empowering people and letting people understand that they're not powerless, that we're not the problem, we are the solution. And the only way we're going to win and change things is if we understand that each single person has an amazing strength and power. And, they spend a lot of time, just like they want us to think that all the power goes to the EPA or the USDA or those other companies or regulatory agencies. They're, again, stealing our power and saying, you guys don't have any word in this. We got you covered. Your children, we're the adults. We're going to take care of it. But in fact, and it's a big problem in conservation everywhere. People don't feel empowered. People need a handle on top of a problem so that they understand that they can actually pick it up, take control of it, and fight back. And that's what I love about what you guys are doing, is you're helping everybody learn how to fight back. Now, let's see. Oh, we have a question here from Sierra. Tish, can you talk about the Wikiva River? And oh my goodness, I don't know if I can pronounce that. You see that, Tish? You might.
I can see it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that was passed in Orange County, Florida. Are you familiar with that? Can you address that for us?
Right. Yeah, we didn't have anything to do with that as far as the passage of that bill. That's another group working on that. Of course, it claims to be a rights of nature law. It's more about the human, protecting water for human consumption only. I'm happy that it passed. I mean, because anything that obviously promotes rights of nature to me right now is a good thing. But I think we also have to be very careful about the language in the laws, because like we've seen in the past, so many of these movements and ideas then get sidetracked and hijacked. So I congratulate the people for, taking that step locally and drafting something and passing it. But, I see some issues with that particular law. I mean, one, it identifies the right to clean water just for citizens. And, to me, that's an environmental justice issue. I mean, I think, everyone should have the right to clean water, not just citizens. Human right. I see it as a human right, not just citizens. So that's a single problem. It also, we draft our laws a little bit differently. We challenge preemption head on. That particular law does not challenge. It claims that the state and federal laws are superior to that law. Our laws a lot of times challenge corporate personhood, and that particular law does not have that in it. So, there's differences in that law compared to our law. But again, if it gets the word out about rights of nature, it's still planting a seed for that. So again, the people at least took that step. So I'm happy about that.
It's interesting because for human consumption, and we forget about the idea. We talk about this quite a lot on the show. With microplastics as an example, but anything that gets into the environment will then get attached onto by some algae. And then with biomagnification, the effects of the pollution grows and grows and grows. And then, one fish eats it and another fish eats it, another fish, and then a bird. And then the bird either gets eaten by people or passes it on to land. So just protecting water or nature for human use doesn't prevent us from the illnesses and the dangers that we still face with the pollution. And that's why I like what you guys are doing, because you're finding an upstream solution to stop it before it happens. And I think that a lot of citizens will really like that, because that is really, really, I think that's the most important thing we can do right now. We've all learned, like I said, that there's no adult in charge, and these companies are creating their own revolving doors through their own regulatory agencies, whether it's a state agency or another one, and everything bleeds together. The rivers are the veins of our country. The Ohio River, gets into the Mississippi River, and then, you get huge magnification there through Cancer Alley, and then it goes into the Gulf. So everybody eating fish out of the Gulf, for example, who knows what they're ingesting, and so it's sort of like we like to separate ourselves, think that everything is okay over here. If it's, in a sense, compartmentalize. but we need to unify, and remember that everything that we do and everything that we experience is all connected, and it will grow and grow as people do that. Mitch says, humans and citizens are one and the same. The right to clean water is for all creation. And that is super critical. So again, Tish, to bring it back to, and I wanted to just put the site up for a second again, because I think it's a great website, because you guys are trying to empower everybody, and that's really an important approach. But at the same time, people have to open their minds to changing how they think about the world around them in order to really go back and fight this. Now, I wanted to ask you, while we're taking a look at the site, what, how can people come in and, but even before, guys, I real fast, The Invisible Hand, an amazing documentary. I'll put the link on for you this Wednesday. There is a screening being done by Tish and the group, right? Yep.
The 18th Wednesday. Yeah. Well, if you sign up, there's on Clean Water Now, which is the group in Florida that's sponsoring it. It's the new documentary out by Mark Ruffalo and Public Herald about rights of nature. And you can watch there's a link on Clean Water Now's site. You can sign up there for both the film, and there'll be a Q&A after, at 8:00 on Wednesday night. And it'll be several CELDF organizers, as well as Sherry Straub from Florida, and another gentleman, and I'm like going blank on his name right now, but it's on if you the Zoom link on Clean Water Now, that's all listed there. So I hope, people in Florida, because that's like one of the first steps too. That's another way, again, to educate is through some of these documentaries. And that's the latest one that's out. And like I said, it's really the first one, I believe, that focusing on rights of nature documentary.
It's fantastic. I love that we have a new world now where documentaries can really start to tackle these bigger topics and bring it to a wider audience. A lot of times, even if you think back, the only movie that we ever even heard about environmental stuff was Erin Brockovich, until, and that was the movie. It wasn't even a documentary. It was a recreation of what happened with her. And now we find a totally different world. And I wanted to show you guys on the website here, we also have Organize in Your Community. And this is something that is really important, is to remember that what is being pushed here is local movement, protect your local area, and find ways to become empowered to do that. So again, we're not trying to pitch an answer. We're trying to show steps that can help communities make their own solutions. Let's see now.
Can I, hey, Eric, since you brought up Erin Brockovich, can I just say something about
Yes, please.
Because a lot of times I hear that in communities will be like, well, we need to contact her, to fix this, and nothing against Erin. This is just, again, how our laws are set up, right? So, and people are, again, because they don't understand and get confused. So what that movie was about was Hinckley, California, and the water being poisoned by this corporation, and her and this, law firm come in. And what they gained was, because this is how the law is set up, is to get money for people in the community. They got money for becoming sick, but the pollution didn't stop. If you look at Hinckley, California, Google them today, and water issues in Hinckley, California, it's still being poisoned. So that's the difference between rights of nature. Again, it's no fault. That's how the system's set up. And so it looks like a huge win, but what was won was money compensation to people who'd been made sick by this corporation, but it didn't stop the pollution.
Wow, that's a great.
But that's, again, how our system is currently set up. We think, we'll prove that we're sick, but we have to get sick first. Not protecting really the environment.
Yeah, and the last thing I want is any kind of compensation for what I've been through. What I want is to make sure that no children go through this. If we can shut off a valve that stops these pollutions and these cancers and these chronic illnesses, it is our obligation to do so.
Yeah.
People that haven't even been born yet. We are here to fight for a better future. It's even the now, we might only be able to change things so much, but each single step can help people in the future have a cleaner environment. And as we talked about before, the cleaner environment, the better health we have, the better health the animals have, the better health the environment has. And if any of those three become too sick, the other two will crumble.
Yeah.
You know,
I love that, Eric. Yeah, I really love that and what you've said, because it's true. We have to think about what we're fighting for.
Yeah, good point. It's exactly. And you know what? I didn't even think about the fact that Aaron Brockovich was, again, back in that paradigm of business. And, you know, and we really do need to readjust our thinking. You know, we need to look at the foundations of thought. And like you had said, the money organizations and the fact that everything is based on the profits, and then working from there, you know, laws fighting for profits, basically, instead of laws fighting to preserve what we have, you know. And I really think that this is an amazing topic. And I love what you guys are doing. I think it's really important. And again, I like it because you're not posing yourself as the answer, but as a way to empower everybody to make their own solutions. Mitch says the laws in every state require different approaches. Very true. Mitch says, Tish, love your work and will continue to fight for all that has been given. We are the stewards. And, you know, we do need to hold that on. Danielle says, this is inspiring. Glad I'm able to catch the conversation. Signed up and looking forward to the screening. Oh, fantastic. I'm going to be there as well on this Wednesday. I'm very excited to see the movie.
We also have for Florida 2 democracy schools set up for Florida. There's going to be one in December and then another one in January. So there's another opportunity there for people in Florida to engage that way and, you know, learn a lot of this.
Great. Okay. So anybody, especially if you're down in Florida and anywhere around, I'm putting the link on right now, CELDF.org. It's amazing. I just been going through this website and I feel every page that I jump onto, I'm learning something brand new. And I mean, you know, just like your call to action, you know, I had been going through tons of surgeries and medicines and everything. And eventually at one point I said, you know, there's nothing they even really do for me, but I need to get involved and I need to make a change. And I believe we live in a very magical time because we're in a time right now where we have more ability to communicate with each other than we ever had before. They used to be able to keep us separated. And that's, you know, the way that they devised things worked for them in the 1800s because we didn't get together. We didn't know each other. We couldn't create a huge movement. We couldn't create a lot of people coming together and having our minds expanded. You know, we were stuck with what we knew at that time. And now we have this new ability to change everything. And, you know, for me, I've been in it now, direct action conservation for about 3 years, coming up on 4. And it still is a lot of education. And no matter how much you learn, there's more to learn. And Tish, just by talking to you, it has completely opened my mind to a brand new way of thinking, a new way of seeing, and that's going to lead to new solutions and new empowerment. And again, I really think that that's the most important thing is to offer people the concept that they can be the difference that they want to see. Let's see now. Mitch says, when I get down, I watch Aaron Brockovich. Well, you know, it's good that we do have that, but you know, right now with the Invisible Hand, other great documentaries like The Devil We Know, about PFAS and about Teflon and the trickiness of them. There's a great example. They said they went through it in the wrong way legally and got them into a corner, and then they just changed the name of their Teflon, changed the company that produces it, and they just skirted around any of the solutions as opposed to an upstream solution where the communities stopped it from being allowed to happen from the factories forward. So
yeah, and again, like I said, not putting down, you know, Aaron Brockovich and her work at all. That's not the point. Of course, the company should be held accountable, you know, and so that was what happened. You know, they held them accountable. But I just want people to think about in the big picture, you know, that it didn't fix the problem, you know, the systemic problem that we have. And that's one of the things, a lot of the issues we fight are single issue issues, whereas the corporations get the law changed and that benefits all corporations, right? So when it's united, it wasn't a single corporation that got expanded rights. All corporations got those rights. So it's just, you know, a different thing for us, again, to think about and to not doubt. You know, that's another thing that holds us back. We doubt that we have the authority or the ability to make these changes. And that can a lot of times stifle us so much. And I don't want people to, you know, expand your head and believe in us that we can make this change.
Yeah, I like that because it's very true. Like I said, especially in conservation, I feel like it's kind of like the shock doctrine, you know, that they have, where they bombard people with so much negativity that they just walk away and don't want to really be part of it and assume that somebody will do something. And I see that in conservation all the time. People, you know, just sharing terrible images or negativity, and, you know, kindness, positivity, and empowerment are what is the only key that we have, because that's unity.
Right. That's another reason they send us up at the top, right? Like, you need to fix climate change. Eric, will you fix climate change? Well, overwhelming, right? It's like that paralyzes people, but that's why we like local, because at the local, it's so much more, you know, like manageable and like, okay, you can take a breath and go, okay, what can we work on locally? You know, I can do that. And so when you start there, that's a good place to start.
And, you know, I love that. And that's another great example is people start to be concerned about the amount of plastic in a river in India, but don't worry about what's being polluted in their river, in the local town. And there's a lot of distraction technique also used in conservation where, you know, I mean, for example, my first few years, I was traveling internationally with a conservation group. But I wasn't fighting for anything in my backyard or my house or where I live. And I found the fallacy in that, because who am I to go over there? You know, you need to empower local people to make local changes, you know? And so it is a distraction technique that I think a lot of us end up falling for in a way, and going for and forgetting about what's right here. You know, what's being done, because that is where you have the most power. That is your community. And, you know, I think it's impressive what you guys have done in Ohio. My experience in Florida has been amazing. They're some of the most amazing activists down there. They really do come together. They fight on local levels to all unify and change things, you know? Let's see now. Sonia says, thank you both for your work. I spoke to the county the other day about reclaimed water, and we were talking about uses of it. The gentleman indicated that no reclaimed water should ever go into the streets, which then goes to storm drains and then into the waterways. It's prohibited. I agree. I asked him, well, what about the Corps of Engineers allowing the release of water out of Lake O and the pollution that causes death to the marine life? It's a much, much larger issue. And that's a great point, Sonia. You know, there is a lot of, again, it goes back to that concept of biomagnification. You know, we're not just talking about tap water, and we're not just talking about rivers. We're talking about, you know, the river goes in, it feeds everything. And, you know, we've unknowingly poisoned our environment so terribly anyway, with rubber, with all these things, you know, plastic. I mean, plastic, of course, being one of the worst, but it's another distractionary technique in the sense that the companies that are making them are still allowed and by law to pollute. And as Tish said, we go in to just fight for them to enforce that they're still allowed to pollute us, instead of saying, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. And thank goodness for the Rights of Nature movement and people like you, Tish, that have taught people how to say no. We're going to write our own laws. We're going to write what we want as a community. You know, so many people feel that is important, but it's really interesting to talk to you today, because it has been removed from our hands, the ability to even fight back.
And who does that help, right? Helps them, right? Yeah.
Exactly. You know, as Jason says, big picture is big money and big lawyers.
Well, they've corporatized everything. So they've corporatized activism. They've, you know, that's what they're doing. And it takes it out of our hands with the corporations. And then who pays? Like the last comment that was up, I mean, like even in Toledo, we saw that the water treatment plant has to be upgraded. Was the polluter paying for that? No. The people pay for that, right? We don't even like think about that. Like, but that's the ratepayers, or through taxes, we're paying for the polluters activities.
And that's a great point, because, and again, just to make a simple analysis, when you talk about plastic production, an upstream solution, if they do not have to pay for the damage they do to the environment, they can sell plastic at 2 cents on the dollar. But the payment comes in where all the communities have to pay for cleanup, filtration systems, water treatment systems, beach cleanups, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the cost of the damage is not taken into account in an upstream. So they get to benefit and go freely, most of the time even subsidized by local communities. So we actually do pay the bill with our health, with our families, and with our dollars. And so we are paying to be poisoned and allowing that to happen. And that is something that they've gotten away with for a long time. Let's see. Jason says, well said, Tish. Local is everything. Danielle says, kindness and positivity is unity. Yes, we firmly believe that. And it's amazing to find so many conservationists that do think that way. And thank you, Sonia. I am hoping to do a lot more. Get back out in the field here soon once things calm down. And Sonia says, Mosaic is so very bad here in Florida. Yeah, they are a company that really runs things down there. But with the rights of nature, there's a way to fight back, right?
Yep. And I was going to say, and think about how we talk about stuff. I know me and you have talked about this, Eric, and but like they're poisoning us and our children in the future and the environment around us, but we don't necessarily always talk about it that way. And like we talked about in Lake Erie up here, it's like, if we saw other people putting poison into our water, like arsenic and radium and things like that, we would call them terrorists. Yeah. And yet our government's permitting this poison to be put into our water. I mean, like, let's say what it is. Let's talk very frankly and, openly about what is going on. That's the other, because they don't talk about it that way, right? They use different language. They make it seem benign, or that it's being controlled and regulated. I know here we have a de-icer that they're using from fracking on the roads, but they call it brine. It sounds like something you should marinate your turkey in. It doesn't sound threatening, right? It's like, so we can use language also to wake people up and shake, some of the brain cells thinking in the right way, I think. And to be so, we consider it polite and professional, and we have to act like them. And thank you for letting me speak here at this hearing. It's like, no, it's my right to speak here, and this is a big sham, and that's what I'm going to call it out as. I've gone to public hearings and done that, and said, how many of you people want so many parts per million of this poison in your water? And they're all looking at like none, and the EPA officials are sitting there like, oh my God, what's she telling them? You all want zero. I said, if they're willing to collect a bunch of people from the community and bring them together, I'm going to use that opportunity. So use those hearings. Talk to the people in the room, not the, agency officials sitting there.
See, that's exactly it. Because I'm sure what you're saying to them makes perfect sense to them, even though they're trying to find their way through this weird maze, labyrinth of thinking that they've set up for us, that we need to go through. And I, it's a great thing that you bring up also. I remember years back, there was this big thing about, the big danger right now is that terrorists could come in and put something in our water supply. Well, we do have eco-terrorists, and they're not the people that are out there spiking trees and trying to stop construction sites. They are the companies that are harming us, even though it's legal. And it goes back to that cancer of the body politic. We have to realize that the body politic we have is just riddled with cancer right now. And we're never going to move forward that way.
No, but imagine if we all talked that way, to our neighbors and to our family, and that's all those people were educating, getting them to see it differently. So
that's a good point. That's it's another thing we always talk about on the show is that I always think of it as all of us are sort of this giant encyclopedia. We all have our experiences, our knowledge, and the more we talk to each other, the more we educate each other, the more we learn from each other. And it's important to talk to people that are on your political spectrum, and it's important to talk to people that have an opposite version of your political spectrum, because all that stuff is just theater. What really matters is everybody wants the same thing, which is to be healthy, to see their families healthy, and to know that their grandchildren will have an environment where they don't have to wear gas masks to go to the grocery store. And a lot of us, forget that we have the unity deep down. Now, Tish, we are. This is great. I could just go for hours. And actually, I'd like to invite you back on if you'd like to come back on. I think everybody would love to talk to you more too. What I'd like to do real fast before we go too far is everybody, if you have questions for Tish, please go ahead and pop them in the comments right now so we can ask Tish anything that you want while we have her ear. I do see that Danielle says plastic in California cleanup is about $5. Wow, that's insane. That is a lot of money. And we have a ballot measure coming up in November 2022 that will tax manufacturers 1 penny per piece of packaging, but everyone will need to vote on that. So spread the word. Plasticfreecalifornia.org. That's a great initiative. If we can give them financial, again, that's the only thing they understand is money. When we talk about our revolution through routine, we talk about buying products that force manufacturers to change the way they do business. And that is one of the few powers that we do have. When we unify, again, we forget that our one voice is a collective, loud voice together. Let's see. And Sonia agrees with you, says exactly. So Jason says, we created a space force. Now we need a green force. We need a green force a lot more than I'm not too worried about aliens, but I am 100% terrified of the factories that are in every town. She says diseases, illnesses, and disorders have spread like wildfire. And Mitch, I totally agree.
Right, but notice how they shape our minds on that as well. And you talked about that, and you're watching football games and they put on this heartwarming story of a football player visiting a sick child, in the cancer ward or something. That's to normalize it for us, so that as a culture, and they use that medium to do that. We have to resist all that, or even although I've seen the commercials now for some drug for women with metastatic breast cancer, and look at how lovely they can live if they take this drug. And, so it normalizes that whole idea. Don't be afraid of getting breast cancer. We have drugs that can keep you, buying our drug and living for maybe 3 or 4 more years, so.
It's a great, that
I resist all that. That's that, but that's again in our minds to normalize it. Kids with cancer is normal. We have drugs to take care of it, so don't worry about it. And so instead of, I always, and I've had several people in my family with cancer, and die of it. And it's when I see the race for a cure kind of thing, that's again not dealing with the problem. I want to have a race to prohibit the harm, to stop the harm that's causing the cancer.
I think that is the most important thing that we can do. It's another form of pollution is the drug manufacturing companies and the pharmaceutical industry. For example, fluoride is a wonderful example how it's a runoff from the phosphate mining industry. But when we ingest it and then it goes back out into the system when we go to the bathroom, we're putting it into our water supply, and we don't realize that either. And being somebody that's, lost my eyebrows and everything with chemo treatments, my taste buds are gone. These are powerful drugs, and people don't understand that they do not enhance your living ability. You trade it. It's a trade-off. You lose your taste. You lose your ability to be awake. You lose a lot. You're alive, but you lose a lot. And what we get into our bodies, we then put back out through our toilets back into the water supply. So even if you get chemo and you go to the bathroom, you might be putting out 1/4 of what you took into your body that wasn't absorbed, but we are still poisoning each other by allowing these types of solutions instead of solutions to just stop the poison to begin with. And I really think, as somebody that battles with it, I really thank you for everything that you've been doing, because these are the changes we need. These are the changes, they don't even take into account most of the time environmental pollutions because of liability reasons. So a huge section of us are not even being treated properly, and there's no solution for us. And the only solution is to stop this madness. The only way to do that is to change our minds and fight.
And you bring it right back to rights of nature with that, Eric, because it's like everything, we have to be honest, everything we humans do has an impact on nature and the environment. I mean, it's ridiculous but yet when you see corporations put in permit applications, they'll say no environmental impact. Like, we're fighting industrial wind up here into Lake Erie because they're using it as a guinea pig. And they put that that's what they put right on their website. It would have no environmental impact. And that's ridiculous. I mean, and so that's this whole idea that everything we do, but we don't take that into account, like you said, in all the activities that we do. That never even comes into play until after the fact. The harm and the damage is done, and then all of a sudden, well, maybe. But like you said, they don't acknowledge a lot of the environmental issues as causing cancer. So
it's true. We're sort of like chasing our tail in that sense, Let's see. Barbara Wallace says, fight. Exactly, Barbara. We all have the power to change the future. And that is a massive power that they've wanted us to not feel that we have, but we do have. Sonia says, what top suggestions does Tish have for us to do personally?
Personally, I would say start getting involved in your community with whatever issue that you are passionate about. And it doesn't, like I said, this applies our community rights work to not just environmental. So it could be, worker rights. It could be something having to do with, police accountability issues and racial justice issues. Could be homelessness. We've done a homeless bill of rights for Denver. So, get involved and build community, because it's one of the other things that they've been so excellent at doing. It's breaking apart community, making us afraid of our neighbors, right? And actually, COVID, that's one of the positives I've actually seen with COVID, because it's made people see, one, that, well, we can't necessarily count on the government to help us, and it's people pulling together, to help each other. So, but they've been really good at, your local community doesn't matter. That's the least important of any of the levels of government, right? Most people just think, oh, well, we can't do anything here. It doesn't matter. And then they've also made us afraid of our neighbors. They've really broken apart community. And with the economics, they've split people apart. So they have to go where the best job is. So, they've broken families that way. And we don't have those connections that we used to. And I think that's really important. Start there.
Yeah.
Community again.
I love that. And you know what? In a nation divided right now, in a time where it's all about polar extremes, we need to remember what really connects us. And, that is definitely health, environment. I mean, we have one world. We all are conscious of it, but somehow we forget that we're all one people. We're all brothers and sisters. What we do has a ripple effect to everybody. And the more we can get together and put our heads together, the more that we can really fight and change things. And that's a great point, that there is a lot of deception given to us about pointing out division and pointing out differences instead of understanding similarities. And I really think that, it's tough, that we really need to fight through it. And Coralie had brought up a point earlier that, she fights for a lot of stuff, but now they're using COVID to sometimes stop some of the meetings from being able to happen and quieting people down. So, it's a double-edged sword. So hopefully we can find a way to move forward together, from this.
Right. Yeah, it's challenging. And I get that. We've had to learn to use Zoom, and, doing our democracy school now via Zoom. We used to do them in person always, things on screen instead of, in person. But, we'll get back to that. But there is still a way to, with Facebook, and even though I don't like Facebook, but, we can use it during these trying times. But then hopefully the goal is to make the connections. And then when we can meet in person again, to get back, because it's ongoing. Like I said, it's not just, we only have so many months to do this. This is long term.
That is the one. It is the one thing that's always problematic for me in conservation, is I always think I got to get out there right now. But then some of my friends always say, well, that problem is going to be there in 2 years anyway. And unfortunately, there's a truth to that. But as time goes on, we're going to, really see, I think, this unity and moving forward and forgetting about all this division that's been created. I mean, politicians create division because that's their job security. They're like, hey, we're the answer. And if we understood that they're not any answer to any of our problems, they're just part of the problem. We are the answer. And I love, because you guys work with local communities to help them write the legislation that is important to change things that they need right there. Now, we're going to have to wrap it up, I think, for today. But Tish, I wanted to say, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd really like to share with everybody? Anything that I haven't brought up?
Well, just because the local, I know people are really interested in where to start. That's where to start. But we also want that to move upward then, right? It's got to, move beyond that. But the idea is that if you have a lot of local communities, working on these issues, and that we also have state community rights networks in several states. So we have one in Virginia, we have one in Ohio, obviously, out in Oregon, Washington, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. And those are where there have been enough communities working on community rights and rights of nature, and they've come together to form a state network. And a lot of them have drafted state constitutional amendments that recognize rights of nature and community, local self-governance. And then, of course, there's also a national community rights network. So, I don't want to give people the impression that we only do local. That's where we start, though, to start building. And then the goal is to build upwards. And, women's suffrage started local and pushed upwards. It didn't start at the top. Abolition, same thing, so LGBTQ, move, that's all starts local and then moves upward. So don't think that we haven't thought that part through either. And the rights of nature movement, I mean, obviously, like I said, we didn't start it. And so, there's a ton of indigenous tribes working on this globally. There's a lot more to point to globally with rights of nature and places working on it. So yeah, it's a bigger movement than just local.
I love that. I love that, because that it is all inclusive, and there's only way we're going to really bring things together is if we do think and we remind ourselves that our communities are our nation and our nation is our communities. Well, Tish, thanks again for being on today. There's so much to think about, so much to rethink about, and so much to somewhat re-educate ourselves on. And I would like to invite you back on already, because I feel like we could probably keep this going for quite a while. People have a lot of questions, and there's a lot of fascination. So hopefully you'll be willing to come join us in a couple more weeks here. And
anytime. And I hope people will watch Invisible Hand. There will be a Q&A with CELDF organizers after that too. So that'll be a good time too.
Excellent. Yeah, and like I said, I'll be there next Wednesday as well. And I'm going to make sure to put the link on the video as soon as we're done here. We'll pop it up in the comments. And then try to get everybody down there together. And then even that's another way to have another local conversation, which is great. So thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you're doing, Eric. I mean, you could so easily say, you know what, I don't know what's going to happen in my life, and I'm just going to focus on me, and you're not focusing. So you are such an inspiration to me.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a real honor to have you on today. So I'm really appreciate, I feel like we're just all part of one gigantic army that's fighting for the future, and we all have our place and we all have our role.
Yep.
And, together we can change it. So
yep. Agree. Thank you.
I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We'll talk to you again soon. All right, everybody. That was incredible, huh? Getting to talk to Tish and getting to really understand the rethinking of where we are. We can't just change the thing that's not working. We need to go in and change our minds first, change our comprehension of what we're entitled to. And we are entitled to a clean earth, a clean world, a clean community. We're entitled to turn on our tap water and not be afraid of if we're going to end up with cancer or some other chronic disease. Cancer is just my personal experience. There are a lot of chronic diseases and illnesses that come from what's being poured into our water. Now, the problem is, and Mosaic always says this, the solution to pollution is dilution, and that means it goes through our bodies and our water systems. That is one of the most evil expressions I've ever heard, and it's something that a lot of corporations stand behind. And people like Tish are trying to empower local communities to change that. And think about, I love what she said, why are lobbyists and corporations writing the laws? If you're not familiar with ALEC, A-L-E-C, please check it out. It's something that unfortunately happened in the 80s, where lobbyists were allowed to create laws and then petition to get senators to push them through. So unfortunately, since ALEC began in the 80s, we have seen a rise in change in politics where the corporations and the lobbyists are writing the laws, and then people just get behind them as puppets to get their constituents to vote for them. It is a disaster, and it has led to environmental disasters, rise in illnesses, cancers. It's something that we have to change. We should be writing the laws. We should be telling them what we want. It's our world. It's our community. It's our neighborhood. It's our family. And all of that is being pushed away for their profit. And it's just something that we cannot allow anymore. I didn't pay attention to it till I got cancer, and I hope other people can help fight and help join this fight so that they don't have to get an illness or get a cancer before it brings them into this realm of change. So people like Tish are fighting for it. Tish went in for a personal reason and has made a huge impact and has changed other people's lives. And we can all do that together. We are one. We need to be unified. We need to act with kindness and love, move forward. And that's the only way we're going to fight this corporate mentality that's out there. We need to remove nature from profit, and we need to bring it back to health. Remember, as I always say, it's our world, and we do need to talk about it. Danielle says, supers. Everyone is an activist. 100%, I agree. By choosing to participate, it does require changing the mindset and having the courage to break ranks. Absolutely, Danielle. Well said. It's not easy. And a lot of times, even in your local area, you're going to find that people don't want to talk to you about this. Some of my friends see me coming and they're just like, whoa, boy, we got to talk about this again. Doesn't matter. We have an online world now. We can find each other, and we know that there's more of us than there is of them. Okay, so everybody, please, I wanted to just put on real fast before I go one more time. This is the website, CELDF.org. Also, please do me a favor, write in the comments, tell us what's happening in your part of the world. What are you fighting against? Who is poisoning you? What's happening there? And I strongly recommend to contact CELDF.org, talk to them about what's happening in your neighborhood, and they can offer for you localized solutions, ideas, and approaches that can help all of us and help bring the world from a sick state back into a healthy state. And once the world gets back into a healthy state, we can all live in a healthier state. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. It's always an honor to get to talk to everybody about these topics. And it was just a really extreme pleasure today to have Tish on with us, somebody who's really fighting for the future. And I know everybody on the show is out there fighting for the future. And thank you, Sierra. Thank you as well. You're another activist. Everybody on this show, the names I see pop up, are all amazing activists as well. Thank you, Sonia, you as well. And Coralie, keep fighting. I know it's not easy, but it's not easy or comfortable for any of us. We all need to just keep fighting, and we can change the future. So thanks, everybody. Remember, it's our world. Let's talk about it. We will see you next week. All right, everybody. Have a great Saturday.